All right, it looks like we're live. Kara, you pushed it live. We're here. I can see it. What's up, Justin? Can you hear me?
What's going on, man? I can hear you loud and clear. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Oh, this is good. Look, guys.
Beautiful.
Look, you've got like the names. There's like my name's under my name. You put Justin's name under his. I love it, man. Stepping up the production.
I know exactly who everybody is. This is great.
That's good. We like to start it with a very low bar. And if that's like as low of a bar as we can get to, then that's a good spot.
Cool.
Well, look, man, it's cool, man. We haven't caught up in, I guess what, man, at least like a month or two. Since you had kind of left. So we've got people joining now. We've got about 70 people already joined. Which is pretty good for the first like few minutes.
Sure.
So yeah, man. So do you want to tell people like what you're up to now?
Yeah.
You know, like what's latest and greatest with you? I think we did a LinkedIn Live. You're like one of the very first people I ever did a LinkedIn Live with. And I think, but that was a while. I feel like that was, I don't think you'd opened up shop yet though. Had you?
I hadn't. No, this was probably, man, this must've been 6 to 8 months ago. Right?
Shit, really?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. Maybe even
All
longer.
Right.
Yeah.
Time, man. Time.
Yeah.
So yeah, why don't you tell everyone kind of like what you're up to now? Obviously, you know, I'm into it. I think it'd just be helpful for everyone. And then we're gonna really get cranking into the questions. Just as usual, a couple of things. Make sure when Justin is talking, he says something you think's interesting, hit the like button or the thinking man button or some button. Or if I say something, you can hit the heart button. That makes me feel good. And then if you have a question, we're going to talk mostly about career development. You know, it doesn't matter where you're at, you know, and in your career development, you know, be very selfish. That the better the questions that you ask, and the more frequent the questions, the more likelihood that you're going to get a shit ton out of this. So drop your questions in the comments. We've got a whole bunch of questions from before, but you know, feel free to keep dropping the questions in, and we'll continue to try to hop in and answer them as much as possible. So let's hear it, man. So tell us a little bit about what you've been up to. Tell us what's kind of the new and the latest and greatest with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So most folks know me from Patient Pop. I was the SVP of Sales at Los Angeles. It's an LA-based company down in Santa Monica. And I was there for a little less than 5 years, grew the team from one sales rep to over 140, and from the business really from $0 to up to almost 60 million in recurring revenue. And come early this year, just started burning out. Like I made that pretty evident, I think, on LinkedIn. I've done an interview about it on Bowery Capital and with Saster, and I've been pretty transparent about, you know, just sort of burning out towards the end of that really was 10 years, two really, really high growth startups in a row. So talked to the CEOs, negotiated an exit plan, and on August 1st, I stepped away. And for the last now 4.5 months, I've been running my own shop. You can find it at theofficialjustin.com. And what I really do is I advise and I consult for early stage SMB SaaS founders. So that's my niche. I like SMB SaaS. I don't really play too much in the enterprise space. So I advise for them, I consult for them. And then outside of that, you know, I'm working with a lot of young folks who are trying to get their personal brands in order and helping them leverage a platform like LinkedIn to do that. So that's sort of how I've been spending my time, traveling, hanging out with my wife, my 3 dogs, and getting some downtime has been really enjoyable.
I love it, man. And you didn't create your own next thing to burn yourself out again.
That's right. So that was the plan. The plan was actually to take some time off. That was my original plan.
I remember it
was like 100, days in a row. I'm gonna just do nothing. And like if you know me personally, you know that's a highly unlikely. And so I literally the next day signed my first customer, and now I'm just jammed to the rafters with advising clients and like learning a lot on the fly and like making mistakes and all the same, stuff I went through at Patient Pop, but just for myself.
Yeah, dude. Well, look, man, keep the balance, keep the balance. I know, but it's awesome, man. I'm excited for you, man. It's such an awesome, look, I did the same move 7 years ago. So I can tell you that it's a journey, man. So
Totally.
that's exciting. And so look, whenever I hit you up and we hit you up about kind of, talking again, you wanted to talk about career, kind of progressing your career, et cetera. I love the topic. Like what are you so passionate about? Like what are some of the things that get you the most excited talking about, career development, professional development? And then we've got some questions. Again, everyone, make sure to drop your questions in. I've got some questions to go to, and we'll start diving into those. But what gets you excited about this topic?
Yeah, I think the thing that gets me the most excited about it is there are so many mistakes that people can make as they're growing their career, which really hinders their growth. And as I look at myself, like I've shared this before, for the most part, for the first 7 years of my career, I was kind of a failure. Like I didn't do very well. I got fired a bunch of times. I never hit a sales quota. Like I was pretty bad at sales for a really long time. And then like really accelerated my career from age 28 to 33. And it's been an acceleration since. And I learned a lot about like all the mistakes that I was making by stopping making them. And so I get really passionate about sharing with people all the mistakes that I made so that they can avoid them and so that they can think about the long game, play the long game correctly. Like I'm all about investing in yourself, playing the long game, setting yourself up to have a really long, fruitful career, not thinking about like, how do I make $1 extra tomorrow versus, what I'm making today. That's like what I'm really passionate about, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a ton. I mean, but I think it's tough for a lot of people. They have bosses, and sales can be such a, we think it's such a money motivated thing that I see people, make short-sighted decisions that, they don't do what they want to or do what they love because of, an extra tens of thousands of dollars or even $100,000 at times. And they start to short circuit their career early because they keep taking opportunities for money instead of taking opportunities for growth. And I think that is really one of the biggest ones that I see is people just aren't very intentional or thoughtful about what that next move could look like. And they're not preparing the skills they need now to show up ready. And I think that is what most people don't realize is that you rarely get put in an opportunity where they're like, hey, here's a ton of responsibility, figure it out, even though you've never demonstrated anything. It's usually you've been doing things other than just selling that then make the next like. And I feel like when I talk to people, that's the piece that they don't quite get. They're like, well, I'm a top seller. It's like, well, that's not what it actually takes to get promoted. That's the prerequisite,
Yeah.
Or I'm like,
yeah.
I'm a good sales manager. Cool. That's the prerequisite to being a good director. Like that doesn't mean that you're entitled to it. It means you're a good sales manager.
That's right. Yeah. I talk to folks all the time and they want to be VPs, and that's awesome. And that's great. And you should have like an ultimate end goal in mind. You should strive to like reach the level that you want to be at, but make sure that you're accumulating all the correct skills on the way up the ladder, right? You can't skip and jump your way up. You totally can, but the likelihood that you're like really successful when you do that and that it works out the way that you want it to is pretty unlikely, which is why the average tenure of a VP of sales is 16 months long and is, really tragic, I think, in that way. So like for me, what I'm always helping people do is think about their career in the long way. And I think about like 2010, like it was a different day. I was a sales manager at ZocDoc back in 2010, and like it was really hard to make money. And we didn't make a lot. And like, we actually had a joke was like, how it was like hashtag paid in food. Like, that's like kind of what our bonus was like company dinners. And like, right. I made no money, like very, very little, but I stayed in that role for a really long time and accumulated all the skills. And when I made the jump, like I jumped in, 5X to the OTE versus like adding a 10K onto your overall total earnings. So like, there's some of those short-term things you have to sacrifice, and they really suck for a long time. But if you play them right, and I like to help people do that, then you can make big leaps. And I think that's the kind of leaps that I like to see people making in their career.
Yeah, I love that, man. Yeah, and that actually that'll parlay into Matt Lozada has a question that I think is a good kind of way to kick this off. So he says, curious as to what your thoughts are on chasing skills versus chasing titles. When does it make sense to take a lower title to glean the skills necessary to advance in tech sales versus take a management title to try and glean the leadership and technical skills along the way. So chasing skills, chasing titles, what are your thoughts?
I would always say chase your skills. Like, first of all, like there's a couple different things that I would recommend chasing, and it's not just skills. I think there are two really important things. Titles is like, who cares? To me, like everyone on LinkedIn has a BS title to begin with. So like, what does it matter? To me, it's a strange thing to chase. I like to chase skills, and I like to chase people. So that to me is like the infrastructure for a really productive career. So I want to know everything that I have to do as a sales manager to be an excellent director. I want to know everything I have to do as a director to be an excellent VP. And I don't just want to know those skills, but I want to surround myself with people who are going to help accelerate my career. I think when I talk about like chasing something, the thing that I like to think that I did really well with ZocDoc and Patient Pop was I joined a place where I could get really unique new skills, but I also joined a place crammed with superstars, like future CEOs, COOs, other VPs. And to me, like if you do that, don't worry about the title. The title will be the output of your inputs. You'll eventually get the titles that you want at the careers that you want if you chase skills and if you surround yourself with really excellent people. So that's sort of how I would think about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Did you work with Javier Rosas?
Yeah. Definitely. Javier and I were the first two sales guys.
Yeah, that's what I thought, man. No, I'm really tight with Javier.
Yeah, he's great.
I didn't put yes, I didn't even put two and two together. That's cool. No, that's how I built my career. You know, like I constantly would put myself in situations where I knew that I was preparing the skills that I needed for the next role in my current role. And I feel like that is the gap that a lot of people have, is that if you don't know what the skills, and it can't be about what the mythical title is, it's what's the actual skill gap. Meaning like, so for me, again, as you're going from like a manager to a director, it's, you've got to start to learn now what managers care about and what it's actually like to be a skip level, you know, above people from the front lines. Totally. And start to like incorporate parts of that now, because you might get into it. And then that's when you'll realize like, maybe I don't want that. Maybe I want to go do something else, or maybe I want something completely different. So long story short, I feel like every single time it comes down to chasing the skill, you know, over the, you know, chasing the title or the money. Definitely not the money. That's definitely the big one. Like at least for me,
the money will come.
So you have to trust that. Yeah, that's it. You have to have a little. You have to have faith in yourself. That like, cool. I'm not gonna go to this 20. I'm not gonna take this extra 20K to go to this slightly like better role, even if it's not, because I know I'm not going to grow as much as if I went here. Like I made some very key decisions in my career that allowed me to do some of the things you're talking about, where when I went to Career Builder and moved into a leadership role relatively quickly, you know, it's probably a year and a half in. My team was the number one team out of 25 inside teams. And they started a program where they pay for your MBA. And most people don't even know that I have an MBA, but I was like, wait, you'll pay for my MBA? Like, yes, I'm going. So I went, worked full-time, got my MBA full-time. You know, it was intense, but I knew that there were skills that I didn't have. I was a frontline sales manager. Did I need an MBA? No. But I knew that where I wanted to go in my career, there were skills that I just didn't have. Right.
Yep.
And so I took advantage of that opportunity. Then I had been in that role for 2.5 years. The next step up as a leader was like to like a team like with slightly more experienced people. And I'm like, am I really going to grow? Like, well, where do I want to be? And I said, well, where I want to be, I need to go learn enterprise sales, or because I'm not going to be able to go tell some 55-year-old grown ass man or woman like, this is what it should look like if I haven't done it. So I left.
Yeah, totally.
2 years in a row, I was the number one manager in percent to quota. And I left that job to go back in the field because it was a skill that I didn't have. And so then I did that for a year. And then I got the call from Glassdoor. And had I not had now experience in enterprise sales, experience in leadership, and candidly, I went to Missouri State University. So if you're in the Bay Area, people are like, what? Missouri State? So at least I went to Arizona State for my MBA, right? So it's like, had I not done those things, no chance in hell I get to be the first VP of sales at Glassdoor. No chance. Zero.
Yep.
And so that I always, you have to, and I'm not saying this to like, brag, or it's, you have to look at your career intentionally. You have to, especially when you're, earlier you are in your career, the more that you can really snowball some of this stuff. But that was my path, man. And I always was honest with myself. I didn't need someone else to tell me. I looked at myself. I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm good at. The results speak for themselves. And I don't think enough people do that. I don't think enough people are intentional or as thoughtful about what's going to be required of that next step. And so now I've got to go put in that grind to start to learn those skills outside of my 9 to 5.
Yeah.
As opposed to like,
it's so nice. It's so nice that they had an MBA program. Like, one of the things that I talk about a lot is investing in yourself. And if you follow me on LinkedIn or you read my blogs or whatever, like I always talk about, like, spend your own money on yourself. Like I try and turn around 1% to 3% of my total earnings back into something that helps me get better. And if you have worked with me personally, you know some of my strengths, but you also know a lot of my weaknesses. And my weaknesses are like, I suck at finance. Like I failed accounting 211 and 212 at Ohio State twice. I had to take them in summer school. Like I had Fs, and like it's just not a strength of mine. Is the financial side. And so when I spend money today, like I spend money on courses, I spend money on events, I spend money on any information that I can get to get better at that. And so to me, it's also just being really self-aware of what you suck at and like spending money to get good at it, or spending time or energy or getting a mentor or any of the ways that you can invest in yourself.
Yeah, dude, I love that. And maybe Kobe asked a question. So I just kind of walked through that was what, 26 through 30. That was my kind of that little like time span. So like for you, what was your journey like? Like what was so that was my kind of 26 to 30. What was your like pre 28 to, like what was your, and so I had some other like things that happened before, but tell me how those learnings kind of got you to that role at ZocDoc and then Patient Pop.
Yeah. I graduated from Ohio State in 2003. And then I got into pharmaceutical sales, which is what my dad had been in for 41 years. And like my parents have a nice house and 2 cars. And I was like, oh, that's life. Like we live in a farm town in Ohio. And I was like, cool, that's what I'm going to do. So like, I took a job in Steubenville, Ohio, which is on the border of Ohio and West Virginia, like in the middle of nowhere, and like just kind of screwed around. Like didn't really go to work. Like I was super immature. Like all I wanted to do was work out. Like I worked out during the day and like partied at night. That was me. Like that was just the person that I was at that time. And I did okay, and like, but I never really was successful. Like I didn't hit my quotas or anything. And what I did is I just jumped. Like I went from BioVale to Glaxo to some other company. Like I stayed in the pharma world, and then like I finally meandered my way into medical devices. But after having been in sales for 5 years, I had to take a job as a TA, which is like an assistant. It's basically like an older guy was just bossing me around all day, telling me to drive places at 4 a.m. And I was like 27 years old and making no money, living in St. Clair Shores, Michigan, and like still didn't understand responsibility, didn't understand accountability, wasn't working hard, like just screwing around all the time. And I think the big change for me was I got a call from ZocDoc. They were only 9 people at that time in a very tiny office. And they had this idea for online doctor's appointments. I took a bus from Allentown, Pennsylvania, where I was living at that time. So I've lived in every small city in the planet. And I took a bus from Allentown, PA to New York. And I interviewed with everybody. And to be honest, like I probably had a fabricated resume and numbers, like, and just like, I just needed a job. And like, I stunk at everything I tried. And for some reason, man, the energy of New York, the team at ZocDoc, the product, the people, like all these things kind of like intersected at this one time. And my very first day, I went out and made a sale with my boss, Ryan Stam. Like I made a sale on my very first day, and I got this insane level of confidence. And it was almost like a light switch. Like I was like, I'm going to be the best salesperson ever here. And like, that was it. The last 10 years of my life have been like a completely the opposite of the first 7 out of school. So, and then I went from ZocDoc. I did a stint at Public Stuff, which most people don't know, running sales development and some sales there, and then jumped up and took the VP role at Patient Pop.
Yeah, dude. All right. I love it, man. So what did you, it's so funny how it's like the small things that happen, where like, what if you didn't make the sale on your first day or your first week? You know,
Yeah.
like it's just funny how shit works out. I had, how old were you when that happened? How old are we whenever you got the job at ZocDoc?
28.
28. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, I was 20, I was 26, and I had, for me, there was and maybe actually, I think it'd be good for you to share if you have any of these. I'm going to share, there's in like a 1 month span when I left sports and went to Career Builder. I was 26. And I had a conversation with the director there, and I've talked about this a lot, Evan. But there's two conversations that we had that really changed the trajectory of my like sales career. And the first was, I'd been there for about a month, and out of like 8 people that come out of this training class, I hadn't. And I'm like, oh my God, like I knew I was extremely successful in the previous sales roles, like and I was like, what the hell is going on? And so he took the time to listen to one of my calls, and he goes, Jake, why aren't you reading what we've like trained on? Like, why aren't you reading the script basically? And I'm like, look, dude, I am this seller. I am God's gift. And he goes, Jake, and I'll never forget. I mean, it's so like ingrained in my brain. It's like, Jake, do you think we train 1,000 people on this process because it does? It's like, probably not. He's like, exactly. He's like, dude, just execute. He's like, drink the Kool-Aid. And I was like, look, I'm not. And I do it, and I closed 6 business. And it was like, that is when I first realized that sales was a process, like that it wasn't this like, amorphous thing where I would read constantly and listen to CDs on sales. Like I was always working on my techniques, but I didn't understand the process. Mm-hmm. And so I had that conversation that changed the trajectory of my career. And then the other conversation I had with them around that same time is, what are your goals here? I said, I want to be in leadership. I want to be a manager, right? Because that's what everyone says that they want to do, or lots of people. Yeah. And then he said, that's not a goal. He said, that's not a goal. And I go, what do you mean it's not a goal? He's like, it's not a goal because I control it. He's like, I decide if you get promoted to leader because I run this office. He's like, now what can you control? What are goals? Well, are you hitting your activity numbers every day? Right? And setting a good example for your coworkers. Are you leading trainings and mentorship? Are you trying to help your team? And are you hitting your sales numbers? And I was like mind blown, like, oh, you've got to manage. Like, it's not about what I think is good. It's about what he thought, because he promotes you. And I think that's for every role. So few people have that conversation with their boss, and they constantly wonder why they get passed over for the VP role or the director role or even the manager role. And it's because you're aligning to what you think needs to get done. And that just changed my whole paradigm about how to think about growth from those 2 conversations with Evan. And it allowed me to take a lot more control of my career, because I now had this kind of process thing that I had learned. And I also now realized, like, I've got to also like do my job and these other things if I'm going to move ahead. And so what about you? Do you have, those are kind of like my go-to stories about my own career that kind of like transformed them. You talked about making that sale. Are there any other stories or any other kind of like advice from leaders that like are like your top few?
Yeah, I have so many different pieces of advice, but I think like the one that I like to think about is this intersection that I talk about, which is like, I've seen so many people be like, hey, I got offered a job as a VP. Cool. Tell me about the team. Tell me about the product. Tell me about are you passionate about it? Like, are you excited? Like, oh, it's kind of this weird product that like, it's fine. It serves it's like, find something that you're super, super excited about. Like for me, I try and make sure that like, it's not just the title and it's not just the money, like push those things aside. It is, are you pumped? Like, are you going to be really excited to dedicate the next 5 to 10 years of your life to this company? Right? Because you don't just like being a VP for like a year. I guess you get the experience, but like, you're not really building a career for yourself at a place, right? So like, do you love the people? Do you love the product? Do you love the audience that you serve when you're selling this product? Like, you have to love all of those things. So to me, again, it's sort of like outlining those things and saying, does the role that I'm going to take check all of these boxes? To me, that's the most like important to me. I think one other one that's been really important to me is I love like being motivated by other folks' doubt. And so I try and find like a story every time I find myself in a new role that like is an external motivator for me. And so like
Right.
one very early in my career at ZocDoc was we were on the bus to an event, and the director of people leaned over and said, "You know, we put you in Staten Island," which I didn't have a car. I was walking like 5 hours a day in Staten Island. He's like, "You know, we put you in Staten Island because we thought that you were going to fail." And I was like, "Oh, cool." And I was like really,
Dang.
really, really frustrated by that. And rather than like, I see a lot of people today that would take that and be like, "I hate this company, I'm quitting." It's like, why not just take that and just ram it down like everyone's throats? Like, why not use that as like this
I hear you.
incredible like locker room, newspaper article you put up? Like, I love like finding those opportunities, and when you find them, harnessing them in a really positive way. I don't feel negatively about that situation anymore. It's still a story we talk about when we meet up. So things like that are really important to me. And then like lastly, I think one that's just super, super important is the people. I think you and I are probably in a similar situation where we're connected to so many of the folks around the sales leadership community, and that's not by accident, right? That's because we were likely very, very specific in our choices of who we like to align with and network with and spend time with and work with. And I think when you do that, you can kind of put the resume away for the rest of your life, which is pretty awesome, right? Like if I decided I wanted to jump back into the game, tomorrow, I wouldn't put together a resume. I would, jump on the Revenue Collective Slack channel, or I would hit up a bunch of my buddies and I would see what's going on out there. And I think you can't forget the people part of it.
Yeah, I love that. That's something that I think I did a really bad job of, like, for a lot of my career. Meaning I was similar, like that attitude. I'm like, I don't need fucking anyone else. Like, I got this, like, and I realized like that was not right, like over time. Like that was like, wow, if I would have been doing this, like
Yeah.
building relationships more, but I had like this attitude, because you know how it is, like networking at times, or like even the difference between like networking and building relationships, like sometimes we can get all of those like convoluted. And so I think I always just felt like, I don't know, like I could figure it out, again, because I would read, because I was like such a like learning freak. But I was a mistake, like I look back, I'm like, God, what if I had just started doing this stuff like when I was, 30, like how much different, but it's all good now. It all works out. But I don't think I figured that out as quickly as you did, it sounds like.
Yeah.
All right, we've got some good ones here, man. So I want to jump into this. Is a good one. So what are some of your biggest gaps in skills knowledge that you're both seeing in current VPs of sales? This is from Nick Studito. All right, I apologize, Nick. That's my bad. But maybe, so two questions. One, how about what were the things that you didn't realize? Like, what were some of the mistakes that you made when you were first time VP? And now, what are some of the skills that you see? Like, what are some of the gaps that you see in current VPs, or maybe it's similar things? So your top mistakes, first time VP, and what you're seeing with other VPs.
Yeah, my top mistake as a VP was not planning well enough. I think at Patient Pop, we might have missed 1 year while I was there. It was the year where it was like, I think it was like 2016, 2017. I don't remember which one, but like we were late to the game planning. Like we didn't get our plan done. Like I didn't know how the company was going to hit our revenue targets until September or October of the previous year. And it's like, well, the next year is just sort of right around the corner. So you're failing to plan effectively. And as I got better and better, I started planning, 6 months out, then 12 months out, and then eventually got to 18 to 24 months out. And that's when you're really, really, really planning effectively. And so like, I think moving into the VP role for the first time, you don't recognize how far ahead you have to think. And so that was like a major challenge for me. The biggest challenge that I see other folks who are either in like director level roles or VP level roles for the very first time is the idea of how to work cross departmentally. That to me is the biggest challenge that I see. They're so used to being zoned in with their team, their department,
dude.
And then suddenly it's like, hey, in order to get what I need backing from product. I need finance to be bought in. I need CS to be bought in. Like I need I need all the stakeholders across the org to be really having my back, and they have to understand that now you're internally selling, right? You're selling the same way you sell to your customers, but you're rounding up, the stakeholders inside of your org. And I think it's just a different skill set that people don't realize. And so, like myself, I think early in my career, I got a little tempered. Like I got a little hot-headed when I couldn't get people into my buying in, and I lost my temper a lot.
Same.
And I see a lot of people who are younger or earlier doing the same thing, and so you got to learn how to do that.
I'm thinking about, this is on the sales floor at Glassdoor, me and our head of legal, like in each other's face, like literally them being like, is he gonna hit Jake? Like, I suck so bad at that. I suck so bad because, I had come from a culture at Career Builder where like sales was, we could do whatever we wanted. We ran the show. And so at least, again, like because I got my MBA, I had a chance to work with engineers and products and ops people like in projects. And so like, I did have some purview of like different people's perspectives, but I still had too much of that, like sales is the most important, like attitude. And it totally rubbed a bunch of the execs the wrong way. And that's, so I was like doing, if they liked me is great, but I did that. I think my biggest one, and maybe you can relate to this, was I don't think I was thoughtful enough about the role profiles and interview process and onboarding fast enough. Where, we went from 0 to 40 full-time people in about a year. And so when you grow that quickly, you got to have an amazing like understanding of what makes someone successful at your org, an amazing way to interview those people. That's not like, what do you think? And then a way that doesn't involve you as like the catalyst for the onboarding. And so that I think was probably, when I look back, one of my bigger mistakes. Like talk about like thinking ahead, that I don't know if I don't think I had a choice to not hire the 40 people, like we just raised a boatload of money and like I had to go hire them. Like there was no choice, but I don't think I was very intentional about how I found and set those people up for success. And that's when I look back and like, shit, I probably caused myself like a lot of like angst that I didn't need to, if I did, just because we, this in sales in particular, I feel like, a lot of times our interview process is a little more lax and salespeople are really good at interviewing. And so if you don't have a rock solid process in place, you can get screwed.
Yeah, man. We definitely went through that at both.
At least that's what was my experience. And then
we went through that in both businesses I was a part of, and it was it's super challenging, right? Like I think, especially when you're growing really fast, I think we recognized early that involving some of the salespeople at ZocDoc in the interview process was really healthy. I think Cyrus, the CEO, did a really good job of that. Like I was involved, Javier was involved, Brent, Matthias, like all the early sales guys were really involved in the process because we sort of knew like what it took to be good. And I really appreciated Cyrus, the CEO, involving us early. Like I was brand new salesperson. Here I am, suddenly I have more responsibility, and it brought me closer to the company. It brought me closer to the business. I started learning. So like, but we definitely didn't like document it well or do a good job of like building a process. We were just dumb kids. Like we didn't know what we were doing. We were just like, yeah, that guy's awesome, or that guy's not very good. And that was sort of our interview process back in the day. But we streamlined it and made it process driven over time. But probably too late. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. It's that it works out, but it can hurt culture for a little bit.
Totally.
Or because you have unnecessary churn, right? You hired people that you probably shouldn't have hired. Not that they're bad people. It's just they weren't a fit for this, And I think that's what I didn't take into effect too. All right, man, we've got some other like really good ones here. So I'm gonna jump to the next one. Let's spend some time like going up the ladder. So there's a question in here. Let me go try to see if I can find it here. Someone had a question about going from SDR to closer. Let me see if I can find out who it was. Anyway, the question was about like, what do you think if you're in sales development and you're going to be an account executive, what would you do? Like, what are the things that you think are most important for that leap?
It's a great question. I mean, I think so. For me, in the businesses that I have been a part of, one of the things that differentiated top salespeople from other folks who are average or below average was we had very much an expertise based sale, which means we're talking to physicians all the time, very smart people. And so in order to win deals, we had to establish expertise very early. The physicians had to feel like they were talking to the folks who knew the most about marketing their practice effectively. And so one thing that I often saw that caused failure in jump from SDR to AE is they were able to continue that SDR skill set where they could prospect and they could land demos. But whenever they got on the demonstration, it became very clear right away that they weren't an expert because they hadn't done their product diligence. So I think about the person at Patient Pop whose name will remain nameless because I don't want her to be thefted. But she went from SDR to AE and has established herself as the best AE at that company. And she knows more about the Patient Pop product than I do. Like if you want to do a deep dive into the integrations, you want to rip it apart and go technical, like she's basically as good as a sales engineer is. And so they get so excited to be in a closing role, to land a demo, to be talking to an end user, and don't spend the time like becoming a product expert. So what I might recommend is in on-the-job sort of training. Like when I hired Kevin Dorsey to run inside sales at Patient Pop, he did a really good job of installing this sort of always be learning, environment where our SDRs were studying how to become account executives 6 months before they were ever going to be one. And that's so right. when they flipped up into an AE, they were quasi AEs already. And so like, exactly. To me, that was something that we did really effectively. And I, kudos to Kevin on that.
Yeah, I love that's exactly advice that I give, is that I just don't think you have to start acting as if then, and for me, what I would start to do, and if I was an SDR almost off the jump, is I would go to you, the SVP of sales, and say, hey, I want to move into an account executive role. And obviously it means I'm going to need to talk to people. So when I'm able to hit what metrics will you pump? Right? And you say, good question. If you do this, okay, great. So when I do this, I can start to run the discovery process. Yeah, it sounds good. Just start to do it. I mean, I tell people this all the time. A job description is a list of suggestions. Like, if you want to do the bare minimum, then go do the job description. So if you want to go, like to your point, you got to start acting as if. And then let's take it to the next skill. So now I'm an account executive. Let's say account executive to manager. What do you feel are the skills there? So, and I think someone had a question, maybe it was Val. Val said, well, what do account executives do that they think will impress their management that may actually end up hurting them and feel in advance? Feeling like we all do things that we want to do, but sometimes forget to ask or don't realize the effects. So maybe the twofold there. What do you think account executives are doing right now that are hurting their chance to go into like enterprise sales or to leadership? And then what are the things that you see them like doing that they may not know, and then that they're hurting themselves?
Yeah, there's two things that come to mind for me. The first is like, it's cool to win a deal that you don't see coming. Right? Like, oh, hey, I didn't really think that was going to close, and it closed, right? But when that happens a lot, like, and catches your manager off guard, which is like, it's not in your pipeline, you're not forecasting it, you're not talking about it, like no one knows about it, and then suddenly it just pops out of nowhere. Like, it's cool to get the win, don't get me wrong, but sales is a process game. Like, why didn't you know about that deal? Where was it in your pipeline? How do we replicate that? Like, what did we learn from it? And if you're just closing deals and you're never learning, you're never managing your pipeline effectively, like, that's actually something that you have to do as a manager. As a manager, you can't just run around and help your team close deals. You have to know how to look through the pipeline. You have to understand how to move deals from one stage to the other. And like, if you can't do that as a rep, you're actively hurting your chances, in my opinion, to be a manager. And then I think the other one is, if you're a superstar, you're at 100, 105, 110% to quota, and you are not on a regular basis going to your manager and saying, how can I help the team? Then you're blowing the number one opportunity you have to show your leadership skills. There are so many people, and I can think of them at Patient Pop, and I can think of them at ZocDoc, who are extraordinarily me-centric, right? All they cared about was me, 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 me. And so they'd close a bunch of deals, they'd be great for 12, 18 months, and then they'd pop their hand up and say, I want to be a leader. And it's like, who on the floor here is going to go to bat for you? Who have you helped? What have you done? And if the answer is zero, then man, you've really messed up an opportunity. So to me, it's like, raise a hand and be proactively helpful.
I love that. Yeah, the proactive helping, I think, is a good one. And I think it's too, it's whenever, if they don't, like, if you're not adhering to any of the things that you have to do as a leader, I can't promote you because it's a bad look. Like, you might be great, but if you're not doing any of those leading indicators to set up for success, and then I promote you, your team is going to, like, whoever promotes, they're going to go, well, he didn't do it and he got promoted. Like, I cannot promote you. Like, you are unpromotable if you don't do those things. So I think it's a great call out. All right. And then what about the leap from manager to director, or director to VP? So now you're managing managers or you're managing directors. What do you feel like? Because the things that you said from AE to manager, they're the exact same ones that I would highlight too. What do you think are the biggest leaps when you go from manager to director, or director to VP?
Yeah, I think the thing that's most interesting is you have to make this giant leap, and hopefully you've made it before you've done this, but you have to make this leap where you are now officially a company guy or gal. Like, that's it. Every decision that you make has to be made with the best interest of the company in mind. And you can get away with making again, me-centric decisions when you're like an AE or an SDR or sales manager. Once you're a director and you're running a group of managers, once you're a VP and you're running a group of directors, every decision has to be with the company in mind. So you have to learn how to balance a budget. You have to learn how to stop spending so much money, but still drive growth forward. You have to recognize how to do all those things. And you can no longer be the person where you're like, I think XYZ without showing me a business case. Okay, you can't just think something will work. You can't just suggest that something will work. You have to show it to me in the operating plan. You have to build out the funnel. You have to show me the cost. What does it cost to a customer? How much? All the different things that you have to manage and measure before you can execute on something. All that changes when you run big teams. And for me, that was like a big learning for me, is you go from being very, tactic focused, and all of a sudden you have to jump up and you have to be very strategic, and you have to think about how these things impact the bottom line and the top line of your business. So that to me is like the biggest and most challenging learning when folks go from manager up into the director or VP level.
That's great, man. Yeah, I think that's it. And I'd add that the job becomes more human resources than it does sales. Mm-hmm. And I think that is another tough piece. Like, if you're a manager and your team is crushing it, but again, you're not thinking macro like you talked about, for the team, you're not thinking of that level up. You're not thinking about how you're going to replace yourself and how you're going to replace every single one on your team because they're going to all get promoted. Then if you're not, the people aspect becomes so much of what you're doing, because you're constantly hiring, you're constantly trying to slow play this director over here to bring into the team 2 years later, and then you're like, oh, I'm going to go have coffee with this person to go do that. And I'm going to go have coffee with that person. So you're constantly like these chess games of like all people outside your company, inside your company, trying to to assemble the best team, because that's
Totally.
How you're going to win.
Totally, Jake. Like there's one thing that's really interesting when you become a VP, which is like, I'm just, and I don't mean to say this and sound arrogant. I'm a hard worker. I work all the time. That's just the person that I am. I like to work all the weekends and all the days. That's just who I am. And one thing that became really interesting as I was a VP was like, I wanted to have my time taken up, because oftentimes being busy feels like doing a lot of stuff. And I pretty soon realized that assembling the team, the right team, was the core responsibility of the role. And so I went and hired Kevin Dorsey. I put Max Kim Brown in charge of the field. I grabbed Robert Palumbo out of ZocDoc. I put him in charge of channel. I did all of the, I pulled from my network. I put a bunch of people into place. And I think, if you were to ask some of the individual contributors, they might even say, what does Justin do? Right? Like I wrote a sales hacker article. They asked me about what's my week look like? And someone wrote a comment and said, this looks like a pretty light week. It's like, yeah, but I put all the right pieces in place so that the team is efficient and effective, and we're all driving towards, 100 million in revenue. Like, that's sort of the role. Like, I don't necessarily need to be, have my calendar filled every minute of every day. And I think sometimes people get into that role. They feel like, am I doing enough here? But it's like, go get great people. If you get great people and put them in the right role, like most of the other shit takes care of itself.
That's right, man. It's the same as being a CEO now.
Yeah.
that I've just found that I've grown, that that's been the most critical factor to success is just, again, how quickly I can do that. And then empowering people. You hit it on the head that, the chances are with a lot of the people, one of the things I'll tell you, one of the statements that I think I have the most difficulty with at times, especially in the sales world, is when they're like, hire people that are smarter than you, right? Everyone says that. That's like the thing. And like, you're the dumbest person in the room or something like that. And I'm like, that's not usually how it works. Usually you're probably really good at like one or two of those things, but just because you're really good doesn't mean you still can't hire extremely smart people and outsource it to them. And they will do 100% as well as you did. You'll think it's 80% because you think your way is best. But I feel like too many people get hung up on that too. Like it's about the development of your people too. I feel like that to me, I'd say is one of the things, like part of his question is what are people missing? I feel like sales leaders today are lazy people developers, and not in a good way, because there is a thing called lazy coaching, which means I don't give you the answers, and I'm okay with that. I feel like more and more I'm seeing in the sales management ranks and the VP, the director level ranks, that leaders are continuing to run more pipeline meetings and put in place less professional development meetings, and like growing skill sets versus deal coaching. I feel like so many leaders, they just only know how to deal coach versus like actually work with Justin over time so he can increase his ability to understand customers' business objectives, versus coach this deal. Where do you more leaders are just like coaching the spreadsheets versus like the people development piece of it?
It's human nature to go path of least resistance, and coaching people and developing people is hard. So people generally tend to do what's easy, right? So like if your goal is to hit your numbers, and you can do that by deal coaching, then you do it because it's easy and you hit your numbers. But like at the end of the day, 12 months later, 18 months later, you have a team of undeveloped people, undeveloped reps, people who are not happy in their current role, aren't growing their careers. And like that kills culture, right? Like you should be personally advocating for people to move up in your company. Like you should be helping your reps grow, not like holding on to them, right? And I think if you just deal coach, like, yeah, they get better at sales sometimes, but like if you're not helping them navigate the inner workings of your business more effectively, then you are failing as a people coach. And so I see that a lot. And I think it's not always intentional. Sometimes it's just not knowing how to do that.
Totally.
But oftentimes it's just like, that's hard.
Yeah. And I think you're right. That's interesting. So when I was talking about like when I was at Career Builder and frontline leadership, sure, my team was the highest percent to quota. I also, out of, I don't know, probably 400 people in this group, I had the most reps promoted off my team both years. And I chose very early on as a frontline manager, I had one KPI. It was having more promotions from my team to any other part of the company. And if you just make that your KPI as a frontline manager, if you say my job, this is my only job, not hitting quota, not doing anything. My only job is to get everyone promoted. Mm-hmm. If that is your whole goal, your team is going to destroy. I promise. Because you're invested in the right thing, which is the people. And I'm invested in your development. And they knew it. And they knew I was the hard boss. And they'd have to have talks with me sometimes because I was too hard. But they knew you come to my team for one reason. You're going to get real good real quick.
Yeah.
Right. And not just like close more deals and make more money.
Totally. I got like 6 or 7 VPs that have been individual contributors on my team that are now running they're either a VP at Patient Pop, ZocDoc, or running another business. So like that to me is awesome. And that's like the ultimate win, right? Like, isn't that your whole job? Isn't that your whole job? Like your whole job is to create your own like network of, like if you create a network of people who are like, hey man, I'm a VP because you helped me get there. Like you have this insane network. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, dude. And it always comes, I was having drinks with a friend of mine. Do you know Clay Bentley at G2? Did you know Clay or Olivier? Okay. Yeah. There were other guys that I hired at Glassdoor, and now they went to G2 and built out the sales organization at G2, and G2's crushing it. And so it's fun, man. It's fun to get to go and see like what people are doing. All right, man. So we've got time. So it's cool. We kind of like covered the progressions. I honestly think we hit all the highlights. A couple more like fun questions. This is a fun one. Actually, this is it. No, I'm going to end on this one. I like this one. All right. So this person, Tim Denzer, I'm dealing with a large number of fast-growing SaaS companies right now. As a sales leader, how are you managing all aspects of the sales funnel to minimize leakage in your pipeline? So how can I let's try to distill this down to maybe, how are you managing, whenever you think about dissecting the funnel as a sales leader, how do you go about it? Maybe that's a better way to try to tackle it.
Yeah, I wish I had a really cool, sexy answer, but it's not. For the most part, I isolate the problem, right? If I look at a funnel, there are different stages. For Patient Pop, we're a pretty fast sales cycle, about 9 days. So really quick. And so I'm looking at leads to demos to performs. I'm looking at win rates. I'm looking at average customer size, average deal size, whatever. And for me, we generally, if we see a problem, I like to look at a rolling 30 trend analysis, because for us, it's such a quick sales cycle. So I throw it up in Clipfolio in my office when I was there, and I would see these spark lines, right? These trend lines. And as soon as I saw something go south, I just wanted to understand why. So generally what I would do is I would have whomever was running that team, whether it was Robert or Max or Kevin, isolate that problem and come back to me and give me a hypothesis, right? So I'm a very hypothesis-driven sales leader. Hey, Kevin, go find that, and can you isolate the problem there? And then can you give me a hypothesis around why you think it's falling? Okay, here's our hypothesis. Cool. I think that's a pretty good guesstimate around why we think that's falling. What are we going to test in order to see if we can lift it back up? Cool. We're going to run these tests. All right, got it. We're going to run this test. How are we measuring this test? Well, here's our fail fast metrics. Here's our metrics for success. Here's how frequently we're going to check in. This is what we know is a win, is statistically significant. And then we would run an experiment, and then we would isolate that experiment. Did it work? It didn't? Cross that hypothesis off, move to the side, bring the next one. And so for us, it was just very regimented, very, very regimented, but always it started with isolating the one problem and making sure that it wasn't an outlier for us.
Yeah, I love that. I'm gonna steal that hypothesis. That's a really good way to ask that, as opposed to what do you because I think it frees people up to answer the question more free, to have more freedom, as opposed to what do you think you should do, or what do you think the answer is?
Yeah, totally.
I'm totally gonna steal that. The thing I'll add to that, Tim, it's really important to you, and it all depends on the size of your team, is to look at the numbers in the macro and the micro. So what I mean by that is if you've got a team, because you'll see this as you start to zoom in on that trend line, it actually looks like this, meaning and you'll have pockets of teams or leaders that are strong at X%, and so you'll see consistently their trial process goes longer, and so you want to try to, when that happens, to try to come up with a way to give them the micro. So Johnny's team could have longer sales cycles, or Susan's team could go longer on the demo. So I always just say, take that and then try to zoom in at the team or the rep level to average to basically the sales cycle and conversion percentage between stages. There's a high likelihood if you go hone in on those two things, you can probably find your issue there. So that's what I would do. So last question, Nelson Gilliat. I apologize if I butchered that. What do you miss most about being on the front lines? What do you like most or least about leadership? Go.
I think the thing I miss most about being on the front lines is I control everything. So I am, by nature, a massive control freak. That's just who I am as a human being. I'm sure anyone who's worked for me will tell you the same thing. So I miss having the control. As an individual contributor, I miss. Whoop. Getting a lot of noise over there.
Oh, I'm going to come.
No, because from this phone.
Okay.
For the room is breaking, yes or no?
Give me 5 minutes.
Oh, okay, perfect.
I muted Jake.
I'm still in my hotel, man.
So I miss, controlling my sales cycle and my sales funnel. I think that's really, really something that to me was important, because I could build my business really easily for myself as an individual contributor. I miss some of the freedom of not having to worry about politics in the office, or dealing with some of the stuff that goes on with managing 140 different people. I mean, I miss as an IC, and I think the thing I like most as a leader is I have been able to create other leaders. And when you're able to create other leaders, and people are really happy about their career because they've worked for you and you've helped them get to a place where they're excited, you build this automatic network of smart people that you can use to dissect future difficult challenges. And that to me is the biggest thing I love about leadership. The thing I like the least about leadership is probably the same thing most of us dislike, which is like the HR and people side of managing a really huge team of 140 people. It's not usually the most fun. So those are sort of my honest answers.
Those are good. Yeah, because as a leader, you still get to close deals, right, from time to time. That would be,
sure.
There's nothing better. There's nothing better than that 1 second after
totally.
someone says, let's do it. Like that's the best, for me. But I still, obviously I'm still in the trenches. You're still doing your thing too. I would just, the leadership piece for me, it really is, it's the thing that can be the most difficult at times is speed. It's so much faster. I'll tell you, this is my hardest part. It is so much faster to give people the answers than it is to coach and listen and have them figure it out. And when you've got a leader and you're managing a team of 140 or 500 or even 5 people, you got a lot on your plate. And so you can tend to kind of go too quick and as opposed to sitting with that person or that thing and letting it take a little bit of time to flesh out. So that was something that I really struggled at as a leader. And I think I still do, is like, just holding enough space and being patient enough, like it's going to work out. You don't need to give the answer.
Yeah. Love it.
That's my big one. So my man, I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much, Justin. Where can people find you? We'll drop it in the comments. What's the best way to get at you? If you are a company in the SMB space, you're looking for outside support, like from sales leadership or consulting, call Justin. He is the man at this stuff. What's the best way for people to find you?
Yep, there's 3 simple ways. The first one is my website, which is theofficialjustin.com. You can email me at hello@theofficialjustin.com. And one other thing I'm really excited about, which I think will be relevant to your audience, Jake, is, about 12 months ago, I started posting on LinkedIn every day, and I grew my network 10x, like you've been growing your network, and it's been insanely valuable to me, right? Podcasts, webinars, advising opportunities, all these different things is coming with this brand. And so I put together something that I think will help other folks do that. And they can go check it out. It's called the LinkedIn Playbook, and they can go to thelinkedinplaybook.com. That's just thelinkedinplaybook.com and check out what I've put together. And hopefully your audience will think it resonates if they're looking to level up their LinkedIn game in 2020.
Love it, dude. All right. As you can tell, the hotel's trying to kick me out right now. So I got to run before they're calling, they're knocking. They're like, sir, it's 2 p.m. Like, this is just egregious at this point. So thank you, everyone. I really appreciate everyone tuning in. Mondays at 1 p.m. Eastern. We had about 330 people show up, man. Right now, 330 people watching, which is good.
Sweet. Love it.
So
awesome.
Thank you, everyone. So appreciate it. We dropped all the links to Justin's sites here in the comments, so you can check it out there. You may want to tag yourself in these posts just for the simple fact that you can come back and access them. You can always find them in the posts and on my YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube, we've got all our LinkedIn lives. You can check them out there. And have a great rest of your week, everyone. Thank you again, Justin. I really, really appreciate it, man.
See you guys.
See ya.
Bye.